Who would you consider as the most baddest person in history? Depressed pun linked the Gurkha who took out 1530 Taliban single-handedly when surrounded. In a similar manner, Lachin and Gurung, another Gurkha who held back by himself a force of 200 Japaneses in Burma during World War II for 4 hours, with one of his hands unusable due to a grenade he tried to throw back after already doing it with other two already, and screaming come and fight a Gurkha. Galvarino. He was a fierce Mapuche warrior that had both of his hands chopped off as punishment when captured by the Spanish during the Arauco War. Rather than slaughter Galvarino, the Spanish sent him back to the Mapuche to send a message, but instead of causing the Mapuche to surrender, it had the opposite effect. Galvarino decided to have two knives lashed to the stumps where his hands used to be. He learned to fight without hands while using the knives as weapons. Less than a month later, Galvarino fought with the Mapuche against the Spanish again. Around 3,000 Mapuche warriors engaged 1,500 of the Spanish on November 30th, 1557 at the Battle of Milarapu. Although they didn't win, Galvarino killed several of the Spanish before the army of 3,000 were all killed. If I remember correctly, he was offered a chance to live at the end of that battle, but he basically told them that he was going to fight them until they killed him. So they killed him. I'm not sure what they expected from Rage Magnificence, to be honest. That he would retire to a life of pottery, he says, presenting the ceramic cutlery he's just fashioned. Never speak to me or my son ever again. Helgemir, also known as God's Rambo, a Danish special forces officer who bought a 1972 Camaro and turned it into an armored beast so he could deliver humanitarian aid in war-torn Yugoslavia during the civil war and ethnic cleansing. Well, you can't mention Helgemir without giving some details about the car. 1979 Chevrolet Camaro, metal reinforced windows, Kevlar paneling, mine clearing understructure, stealth paint, infrared headlights, run flat tires, mother-in-law spec GPS and a night rest system. It was hard to detect, hard to chase, and it shrugged off bullets. Oh, and it had a little yellow rubber duck wedged in the front grille. Link. But on the subject of Helgemir, note that he wasn't asked by anyone to do this. He just saw a humanitarian crisis on TV in Denmark and decided to do something about it. He was just a civilian at the time, albeit a former Danish special forces operative. He didn't even carry a weapon. Witold Pilecki volunteered to Auschwitz death camp and escaped it to report what was happening there to allies of Poland. No one gave a duck at that time. I think Pilecki is the ultimate unit of badassing. Even in his kangaroo court trial he declined to show any sign of surrender. When God created the human being, God had in mind that we should all be like Captain Witold Pilecki, of blessed memory, Michael Shudrick, Chief Rabbi of Poland. Peter Fruchen. He was a Danish explorer, journalist, author and anthropologist. He is widely known for his exploration of the Arctic Circle and discovery of vast areas of Greenland. He was an indigenous rights activist. Having married an Inuit woman, he escaped a death warrant issued by the Third Reich for punching Nazis, received an Academy Award for the Best Motion Picture in 1933, won the 64,000 question as a contestant on the game show. He wrestled a polar bear and won. And as if this all wasn't enough, he escaped a near-death encounter in a blizzard by fashioning a spade out of his own frozen fesses. Damn. Impressive guy. Took a turn at the end that I was not expecting though. Desmond Doss, an army medic in WWI who was constantly belittled and abused by his battalion and superiors for refusing to use a weapon as it went against his beliefs. Then, when he landed in Okinawa and more than half of his battalion were shredded by Japanese machine gun fire, Desmond Doss crawled through the dirt over the course of several days to as many of his injured allies as he could and dragged them all the way back to the 40-feet cliff they had scaled up from, then lowered them to safety. Some of these injured men were lying, multiply 15 feet from the enemy machine gun itself, and all the while Doss wore his medic helmet, which stood out like a giant bullseye on a battlefield where the Japanese soldiers were ordered to kill doctors first to crush morale. In the end he had saved the lives of 75 men and survived with an arm fracture from a sniper round and several pieces of shrapnel embedded in his body from when he tried to kick a grenade away from him and his men. He is the only soldier without a gun to be awarded the Medal of Honor. Edit the first conscientious objector to be awarded the Medal of Honor. There have been others since. To add, when he fails to kick the grenade and it exploded and shattered his leg, he still insists for the stretcher carrier to bring the other wounded first before him. This moment is not included on Desmond's biographical movie Hacksaw Ridge. Why? Because the director, Mel Gibson, said that he thought that people would think that the scene is exaggerated and unrealistic, despite it literally happened. When you are so badass that the movies say it's too far-fetched. Nancy Wakelink, so skilled as she was nicknamed the White Mouse by the Gestapo due to her elusiveness in avoiding capture. Highly talented in espionage, she worked as a spy for the French resistance and the Special Operations Executive to take down the Nazis. One of the more highly decorated women from World War II, yet not well known. Well, that's what she's good at. Canadian Rambo Akilio Major. Dude liberated an entire town in the Netherlands by himself while injured in World War II. Link. It's why we hang Canadian flags in some parts of the Netherlands when we celebrate Liberation Day. Canada liberated most of the Netherlands above the Great Rivers, which split the country in north and south, and the town that Leo liberated happens to be Zwaal. Edit to all Canadians who love to see how we invite Canadian veterans to celebrate Liberation Day in the Netherlands, so that we can thank them for their service. Link. They will tour trough Dutch citizen WWII vehicles, while Dutch people cheer at them like if it's 1945 again. Another cool fact. When the Dutch royal family fled the Netherlands, they took refuge in Canada. The day when Princess Juliana got a child, Canada changed a law that made the hospital Dutch territory so that her daughter could be born Dutch. Now till this day the Netherlands is sending tons of flowers every year to a park in a tower, and we even bred a special tulip that looks like the Canadian flag, which looks like this. Link. Mireia Oktyabrskaya. Her husband was killed in WWII, so she sold all her possessions, bought at 34 tank, and went into the army. Edit. Technically she sold her possessions, donated the tank, and then asked to drive it and was allowed. I didn't know you were supposed to bring your own tank. That's exactly what she thought. That teenage girl that was the sole survivor of a plane crash and made her way through the Amazon. She's definitely up there. Edit. Thank you everyone for telling me her name and teaching me more about her story. I want to give her the respect and add her name, Julian Cope. And thank you for the rewards as well. While injured, bleeding and functionally blind nonetheless, she had a strong prescription and lost her glasses in the crash. I remember reading that she waded through a river, using a shoe to tap in front of her and scare off possible snakes. She was then found by a native tribe boating in the river. Edit. Since a lot of people pointed it out, her name was Julian Cope. She was found by loggers, not natives. I was going off my memory. Didn't think this would get as popular. She was then found by a native tribe boating in the river. You're just going down the river, like always, and you spot a nearly blind foreign child warding off snakes in the middle. What a day that must have been. Then this completely out of place being tells you she fell from the sky. Wild. Napoleon. Ducker got half of Europe declare war on him. Not France. Him himself. The woman who killed the hitman her husband hired to kill her. The woman who killed the hitman her husband hired to kill her. I immediately began to think about his family. Everybody has somebody who loves them. Children. A wife. A mother. A dad. The worst of this is not that somebody tried to kill me, but that I had to kill someone else to survive. But I have no shame, because I did not choose this death for him. I chose my life. I chose life. Badass and incredibly mature. Daniel Inouye. Senator from Hawaii. WWII vet. Japanese American who had to prove himself every step of the way through the European theater of operations. And to me an honest to goodness hero. In 1943, when the US Army dropped its enlistment ban on Japanese Americans, Inouye curtailed his pre-medical studies at the University of Hawaii and enlisted in the Army. 6. He volunteered to be part of the segregated all-Nazi 442nd Regimental Combat Team. This army formation was mostly made up of second-generation Japanese Americans from Hawaii and the mainland. I was promoted to sergeant within his first year, and he was assigned as a platoon sergeant. He served in Italy in 1944 during the Romano campaign before his regiment was transferred to the Vosges Mountains region of France, where he spent 2 weeks in the battle to relieve the Lost Battalion, a battalion of the 141st Infantry Regiment that was surrounded by German forces. He received a battlefield commission to second lieutenant for his actions there, becoming the youngest officer in his regiment. At one point, while he was leading an attack, a shot struck him in the chest directly above his heart, but the bullet was stopped by the $2 silver he happened to have stacked in his shirt pocket. He continued to carry the coins throughout the war in his shirt pocket as good luck charms, until he lost them shortly before the battle in which he lost his arm. On April 21st, 1945 LT, I was grievously wounded while leading an assault on a heavily defended ridge near St. Lorenzo in Liguria, Italy, called the Caul Musatello. The ridge served as a strong point of the German fortifications known as the Gothic Line, the last and most unyielding line of German defensive works in Italy. As he led his platoon in a flanking maneuver, 3 German machine guns opened fire from covered positions 40 yards away, pinning his men to the ground. I stood up to attack and was shot in the stomach. Ignoring his wound, he proceeded to attack and destroy the first machine gun nest with hand grenades and his Thompson submachine gun. When informed of the severity of his wound, he refused treatment and rallied his men for an attack on the second machine gun position, which he successfully destroyed before collapsing from blood loss. As his squad distracted the third machine gunner, I crawled toward the final bunker, coming within 10 yards. As he raised himself on his left elbow and cocked his right arm to throw his last hand grenade, a German soldier saw I and fired a 30mm Schusswache anti-personnel rifle grenade from inside the bunker, which struck I directly on his right elbow. The high explosive grenade failed to detonate, saving I from instant death, but amputating most of his right arm at the elbow except for a few tendons and a flap of skin via blunt force trauma. Despite this gruesome injury, I was again saved from likely death due to the blunt, low-velocity grenade tearing the nerves in his arm unevenly and incompletely, which involuntarily squeezed the grenade tightly via a reflex arc instead of going limp and dropping it at I's feet. However, this still left him crippled, in terrible pain, under fire with minimal cover, and staring at a live grenade clenched in a fist that suddenly didn't belong to me anymore. I's horrified soldiers moved to his aid, but he shouted for them to keep back out of fear his severed fist would involuntarily relax and drop the grenade, as the German inside the bunker began hastily reloading his rifle with regular full metal jacket ammunition, replacing the wood-tipped rounds used to propel rifle grenades. I quickly pried the live hand grenade from his useless right hand and transferred it to his left. The German soldier had just finished reloading and was aiming his rifle to finish him off when I threw his grenade through the narrow firing slit, killing the German. Stumbling to his feet with the remnants of his right arm hanging grotesquely at his side and his Thompson in his offhand braced against his hip, I continued forward, killing at least one more German before suffering his fifth and final wound of the day in his left leg, which finally halted his one-man assault for good and sent him tumbling unconscious to the bottom of the ridge. He awoke to see the worried men of his platoon hovering over him. His only comment before being carried away was to gruffly order them back to their positions, saying nobody called off the war. Too long didn't read blew up several German machine gun bunkers with mad grenades as he got shot in the stomach, lost an arm, and had to throw left-handed. Then told the rest of the platoon to keep going because shit wasn't done with. Blocked a bullet with silver dollars. Went home to Hawaii, became a senator, and if he'd run for president I'd have voted for him. Absolute badass. Definitely Major Hugh Thompson. I'm sure there are people who have done similarly brave things, but not that I know about. In 1968, Thompson managed to stop the My Lai massacre almost single-handedly. He arrived after many civilians had already been killed and couldn't understand how they had died. After realizing his fellow American soldiers were firing on unarmed civilians, he landed his helicopter between the Vietnamese and the soldiers. He then told the troops that if they continued to do what they were doing, he and his crew would open fire on them. After getting back to base, he filed a complaint about what he had witnessed His complaint was covered up, and he was shunned as a traitor. It wasn't until 1998 that the army acknowledged he did the right thing. It's common to be brave in war when you know that you'll be lauded as a hero. It's another thing entirely to do it knowing you'll be seen as a traitor. He turned against his troops and country to protect innocent lives, despite what it would cost him. And I think that's about as brave as you can get. Battle of Stamford Bridge. The lone Norse axeman single-handedly held up the entire English army. Witold Pilecki, a Polish resistance fighter who voluntarily went to Auschwitz to get intel on what was happening and then proceeded to escape, survived the war and was later executed by the USSR. The Russian night witches link. They flew in slow, outdated planes, without parachutes, and dropped bombs by sight alone, at night. Admiral Yi Sun-sin link. He alone stopped the entire Japanese invasion of Korea during the Imjin War. His country, the Joseon Kingdom at that time, were riddled with corruption, and they offered little to no resistance to the Japanese when they landed on Korea. It was due to Admiral Yi's constant victory at sea that crippled the Japanese supply lines and forced them to retreat. I don't know if it's true, but a story about a kid getting his limb bitten off by a shark. The uncle was with him. The uncle dragged the shark out of the water and retrieved said limb from shark. Believe the kid made a full recovery. I've read about this recently, mostly true, but the boy did not make a full recovery though reattaching the arm was successful. The blood loss he suffered caused brain damage and he remains non-verbal but is living a happy life. He was kept alive due to the CPR efforts of the people around him by wrestling the 200-pound shark. The uncle prevented it from attacking the other children in the water as well as helped to retrieve his nephew's limb. Totally as an aside, apparently a bullshit accusation went viral penned by an anonymous source and ultimately debunked that the uncle had been shark fishing and chummed the water and had landed and reeled in the bull shark that attacked his nephew. Robert Smalls. He escaped slavery, stole a Confederate boat, sailed away to freedom, and later served in Congress. Mary Vincent. She was attacked with an axe in an attempted murder, losing both hands, and then dumped off a cliff. She survived and walked almost 3 miles to go find help, all when she was 15. She's in an episode of I Survived, and her story is unbelievable. She is such a BAMF. Link. Sir William the Marshal. 1 RST Earl of Pembroke. The baddest man alive at a time where only hard men lived long enough to see their hair turn grey. Widely considered the greatest knight to ever walk the face of the earth. Defeated over 500 knights in tourney combat. Is the man the code of chivalry is based on. Defeated the greatest knight in France, handily, in a one-on-one duel at the Battle of Lincoln in 1217. In his Method of King 70s. Effectively ruled England off and on through his regencies for decades. Signatory of the Magna Carta. He gets my vote. Maybe not the most, but definitely an honorable mention. Stanislav Petrov Link, the man who saved the world from an all-out nuclear war in 1983. Simo Ag, the White Death. 500 kills in World War II. Got half his face blown off by an explosive bullet and tried to get back into the war. Link.